everyone, Jaymes Mansfield here bringing you yet another video. Oh my god, you guys, it's time for Iconic Brunettes! Yes! I'm so glad to be back doing the Iconic series, and I have quite the icon for us, folks. The original horror hostess, yes, the OG, the GOAT, the one that started it all, Vampira. Yes, we are doing Vampira today, so if you want to learn more about Maila Nurmi, aka Vampira, and 1940s hairstyling and glamour ghoul aesthetic, stay tuned. All right, let's get started, shall we? Now, Maila Nurmi was actually like a pinup cheesecake model back in the early 1950s. Like, she was dabbling in acting, like she moved from, I believe, Minnesota or something, someplace in the Midwest. It's not that important. What's important is when she eventually got to Hollywood, she became a sensation. All right, like she was gorgeous. She was part of like a burlesque troupe and all sorts of stuff where she eventually would work alongside Lily St. Cyr. Like she was a showgirl. She was doing it all, okay? She was a working gal trying to make it happen in Hollywood. Trying to make it happen in show business, honestly. And it wasn't until she had gotten cast in a Howard Hughes film that never actually came out. It was fraught with a chaotic production, and the film never actually went into production. So, as soon as that project was scrapped, she was out of work and looking for her next big thing. Now, she was invited to a costume party where she got inspired to dress up as Morticia Addams, who was just then known as the Lady in Black, in the Charles Addams newspaper comic. Yes, like all the way back in the 1950s, before the family even had a name or an origin or anything. Like, you know anything about these people. They were just kooky, gothy looking folk that had a ghoulish sense of humor. And Maila was drawn to this. So she would dress up in a long black gown with a slit to show off her cleavage, a slit up the side, and big fright wig. And she looked the part. And she made a sensation at this Halloween party. Okay, now for the Vampira hairstyle, it's very 1940s inspired. Like the look she said she was going for was the dragon lady from Terry and the Pirates, who was like the great villainess of that old comic strip. But she is stylish and she's got a great look, so we're going to go off of that and pay homage to that. It's also kind of Joan Crawfordy when you look at it, like that very severe center part, like a Maria Felix or a Maria Montez, like very like, you know, dangerous women of the 1940s and 30s era. All right, and I'm going to get this roller set and I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Okay, now where were we? Yes, Maila Nurmi was invited to a costume party in the 1950s, but I actually wanted to go back a little further than this. Now, she actually had like a small little career on Broadway, and I mean very, very small. Like she was a hit in a horror-themed show that eventually led her to get cast in the Mae West play, Catherine Was Great, which is like Mae West's satirical take on Catherine the Great, the Russian queen. And according to rumor, Vampira was such a standout that Mae West herself was threatened by her, saying that Vampira was trying to upstage her, or Maila at that time was doing everything in her power to upstage the star. So she had her fired. She fired her from her show, and Maila retreated back to LA. It was a devastating blow, too. It was really like helping her realize her dream in Broadway, and she was starting to get roles after this, and it came to a sudden stop, which is kind of a recurring theme when it comes to like Vampira's career. Like great things will happen, and then they immediately stop. But upon attending this costume party, like I mentioned before, going there under the hopes of being noticed by the Addams Family creator, Charles Addams, in hopes that maybe he'd see like potential in a television show based on these cool gothy characters. Well, she did what they call a disappearing act. When she appeared at the party, she was only there for like a brief moment, like an instance, and then she immediately retreated out of the party so that people saw her, she made a statement, and then she was gone. No one knew where she went. But all they could talk about was, who was that mysterious woman in black? And the costume she wore was made by her because she was working on a very fixed budget. Like she wasn't making a lot of money and she wasn't booking a lot of work. Like she was installing linoleum. She was doing all sorts of odd jobs until something in Hollywood hit. And she happened to be noticed at that party by a television producer, a local producer that wanted to do something late night with horror movies. So he went searching high and low to find this mysterious woman because he wanted her for his new idea. And this idea would be horror hosting. This had never been done before at this point, okay? Like, it was something brand new. They had licensing on all these great old movies from like the 30s and 20s and all this great stuff that was just sitting around in a vault collecting dust. And with the advent of television, it was like the new frontier of like just plugging in stuff at certain odd time slots that nothing was going on. You know, like your 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock to 11, 12 a.m., 1 a.m., all of that stuff was just like dead air. Nothing was happening. So to capitalize on this, they wanted to start showing old movies. And for the most part, old horror movies were always a pretty safe bet because, well, everyone likes to be scared. So he called in Maila and said, I want this character you did. Please do her. We are going to put her on TV immediately. Oh, but he said also, I don't want the whole family though. We don't need the whole Addams family. We just need this character. And she felt horrible. She didn't want to rip off Charles Addams' character too much. So she went to the drawing board. In a matter of days, she and her husband cooked up the idea for Vampira. Now, she got the idea for her from one Morticia Addams before she was Morticia Addams, but she decided to make her a lot sexier and a lot more vampy. So the dragon lady from Terry and the Pirates with the middle part and the severe 1940s shellacked hairdo, the plunging neckline of the Morticia character, and she wanted to like put in elements of sex and death. That's what she put it. So in LA, believe it or not, this was easy to come by. There were BDSM magazines you could buy from specialty shops that showed off like corsetry, Fredericks of Hollywood, like high heels, waist cinchers, these kind of like fetishy, at this time was like, these things at this time are like commonplace now with fashion and everything. In the 1950s, this was straight up fetish stuff. Like you could only find this in specialty catalogs or shops. Like they weren't readily available like this. Like waist trainers that would get your waist down to like a size 16. Like extreme waist cinching and extremely high heels and fishnets and garter belts and all sorts of stuff that like were not really in fashion and in vogue in the 1950s. So she cooked up this character and they came up with the name Vampira. And she brought it to the television producer, presented it to him, he loved it, and he put it on air. Now, it was in a death slot, okay? It was like 12 to 1 a.m. Like no one was watching TV at this time except for like way night owls. But she became an overnight sensation. And the way the Vampira show worked, which is kind of like setting the grounds for a lot of television shows now, when you think of like horror hosting, it was a mixture of camp, horror, comedy, and sex appeal. The way it would start is a foggy corridor, right? And they got this effect with dry ice. Vampira would slowly slink down, and when she reached camera view, she let out this blood-curdling scream and then caress herself and say, "Screaming relaxes me so." She had a very interesting voice. Like, it was almost like Bela Lugosi-ish when you hear her voice, like what she cooked up for this character. Like, she was very, like, glamour ghoul. Like, oh, I talk like this. Like almost Norma Desmond-y is how she was doing it. Like, was a big inspiration for her as well was Norma Desmond. Being very grandiose, like a silent film actress. These are the references she had at the time, okay? Now, the Vampira show would become a sensation. Like, it would have fan clubs all over. But it should be featured in Time Life, and all these amazing things were coming out. But it was facing a lot of harsh criticism when it came to censorship. They did not like how crude her humor was or how sexy she looked. Like, and she had a very startling look. Like, full-on, like, checkmark eyebrows, the severe widow's peak, the long fingernails. And, like, looking at pictures, like, how she achieved this is so fascinating because it's so drag. Like, she would block out her eyebrows to extend them higher to create these big checkmark brows, like Joan Crawford brows, honestly. Like, super cartoony. Like the evil queen from Disney. Like severe contour, severe glamour makeup. And her widow's peak, she was a natural blonde. She actually would just use black makeup and create a widow's peak and then put a hard front wig on top of it to blend it. Like, it's fully drag. Like old school drag. Like, she created the Dracula hairline and then placed the wig, the hard front wig, right on top of it. And with 1950s television, you couldn't tell the difference because it was a very harsh camera that came through there. So any kind of like little tricks like that were easily disguised. Like the long nails, she didn't have long acrylics, those didn't exist yet. So they were actually nude mesh gloves that were like regular gloves, like you sew a turkey, right? And she took noodles and painted them red with nail polish, cut them apart and put them on the gloves to create those long nail gloves that were so popular a few years ago with drag queens. Those like fleshy, nudie, like nail gloves. Like interesting stuff, I think. Like I think it's so fascinating. All right, now I'm going to finish teasing this and I'll be right back. All right, we are back. It is all teased out. That's how she's looking so far. It's got that severe part in it. Now, I had to add a little more teasing to it because essentially hers is like flat to the head, right? Because it was like a costume wig that was just readily available. I'm trying to add a little bit of drag to this so that it doesn't look crazy on my head. So that, you know, actual person can wear it without, you know, the harsh black and white television camera looking at me. Now, I am just combing through this and brushing it out to smooth her out. Because that's really what it's all about, is getting it nice and smooth. Now, she had a few wigs that were very, very good. And a lot that she wore, you could tell were well worn and just like were ready to be retired. Like, come around the time the Vampira show was canceled, which bear in mind, it was only on for a year before it got canceled. And Elvira was essentially blacklisted and didn't work again in Hollywood until way later. But let's get into it, okay? So, let's talk about it. Now, lots of scandals were hitting Vampira all at once. First things first, she was getting hit with a lot of problems when it came to censorship. Like, did not like her program whatsoever. Parents had a huge problem with it. Thought she was evil, like she worshipped the devil or something. On top of that, she was also very good friends with Jaymes Dean, who had tragically died in a car crash when his car, little bastard, collided off a cliff and he met a tragic end. And like, they were publishing stories about Vampira saying she used black magic as a way to have him killed. Like insane shit that they were pinning on her. Like all this embroiled with all sorts of stuff that just like really hurt her career. But smartly enough, she bought the Vampira character, she owned it, and she took it with her. Like as soon as the station canned the show, she bought the character. Because they saw no value in it, especially at that time. Like, great, you can have it, you know, just some character that we can't put on television because she's too sexy. Go ahead, have it. So she owned it. She was one of the first kind of character comedians to own their image and their own creation. Like something she had a hand in creating, which would come to be an ironic twist of fate later on in her life when you really examine this story further. Come the 1960s and 70s, there wasn't a whole lot happening as far as Vampira's career goes. Like one of the last big things she would do, which is really not anything to write home about, but it is iconic as far as like cult bad movie statuses go. She did star in the much maligned Plan 9 from Outer Space by the director Ed Wood, who's now a celebrated director for his poor pitches, his very bad movies. Like he's known as a bad filmmaker. Like he doesn't make good films. Like they're virtually unwatchable, and Plan 9 is no different. And he managed to snag Vampira and Bela Lugosi and get this movie made as Bela Lugosi's last feature, even though he was dead. Like, he wanted to get it made, and he got it made. Vampira played the vampire girl, and she was completely mute in it. She did not speak because she did not want to speak. She knew Ed Wood's reputation. Even at that time in the 1950s, he was known as a garbage filmmaker. And she had actually met him at a party way, way, way before for Bela Lugosi Jr., and she essentially laughed in his face and said, like, I will never work with you. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm on the rise. I'm not going to work with you. And lo and behold, when she was on the decline, she worked with them. Because there wasn't a whole lot of work going around for her. Now, she would go on to, like, make appearances in, like, Hammer horror films and things like that. Like, she became a pretty known fixture in, like, the Hollywood horror circuit. She even owned her own thrift shop called Vampira's Attic. And come the 1980s, they wanted Maila to resurrect the Vampira character. Like the time had come. Seymour, the famous horror host at that time locally in California, had sadly died, and they needed a replacement. So they messaged Vampira to get a hold of her to resurrect her character. Now, Maila Nurmi would go into a huge turmoil with this. It became a big fight of her whole life after this. What happened was essentially kind of a double cross. Like, they wanted Vampira, but they could not agree with her on anything. She wanted Lola Falana to reprise the role, and like, there's no way we're getting her to play that. They essentially would go behind her back and decide, you know what, we're just not going to do it with Vampira. We'll do something similar, but not Vampira. So they put a name in the hat, and they drew the name Elvira, and cast the actress Cassandra Peterson to play it. And it was all Cassandra Peterson's like creation. Like, it was a character she had done in the Groundlings for years. It's like this Valley girl just turned goth. And Vampira got wind of this and sued the crap out of them. Like, she tried for years to sue them. And sadly, she was not successful. And it was a very, very, very bitter part of her career that's attached to her legacy now, is that she essentially said, this person ripped me off and I want it. But when you really look at it, it's like, girl, Vampira was kind of ripped off altogether too. Like, you fully admit you ripped off Morticia Addams for this. It's like, girl, you can't own copyright on this character, especially when Elvira's nothing like you. Like, I stand by it. Like, there are similarities, sure, but no, girl. Let's be real with ourselves here. Like, Elvira is nothing like Vampira. Like, Vampira is very serious. Elvira is kitschy and campy and different. It's a different character altogether. Okay, now I just have to go through and smooth this out. And I think I'll be right back with our final results. Shit. Okay, back to the video. Welcome back. This is the final result. Ooh, I feel so ooky, spooky Vampira in this. Oh my God. This is such a fun, like, glamour ghoul hairstyle. It's kind of giving like Maria Felix or like Maria Montez, like a very beautiful, like, Spanish actress, 1950s kind of vibes. I'm living for it, like a mysterious woman. I love, oh, look at me, I'm already into it. Horror hostess already, hello. Ah. Gag me with a crucifix. Ah. Oh my God, this is so much fun. I love Vampira. I think she's so fabulous and so cool. And oh, look at this little horror hostess dress I made myself a long time ago for a Halloween number that never happened. But I'm so excited to be here with you guys. Oh, by the way, big announcement. Well, it's an announcement. I noticed some of y'all have been having trouble with the Depop, so I decided I'm going to make an executive decision. I'm making a creative call. If you look out for my used wig tab on my website, Jaymes Mansfield Beauty, we're going to start selling our used wigs from the videos on there now because people are having some problems with the Depop. So we're going to transition over to just streamline it all on the website. It's going to make it a lot easier. So just keep a lookout on the website for the used wig tab. And I'd like to take a moment for my wiglets. I'd like to give a thank you to Jacob, Ernie, Duke, Roy, Just BKZ, Vera, Cuervo, myself, Sponge King, Hairface, Steve, So Many Kitties, Jake, Larissa, JT, Christine, Curtis, Miss Mosey D, Romeo and Juliet, Selena, Rose, Darth Carey, Catalina Louise, Patio Furniture, Miss Lansing, Eliza, Maureen, Veronica, Molly, Carl, Dolores, Samuel, Martha, and Michael. Thank you all so much, wiglets. And I'd like to take a moment, a VENMO moment. Woo. I would like to thank Mandy. Thanks so much, Mandy. And Patrick. Thank you so much for the VEN moments. Ooh. Now, this is so much fun. I love me some Vampira. If there's an iconic brunette you want to see, please let me know down below. This is one I've been wanting to do for a while now because she's one of those people that helps shape like my vision of drag. Like my drag aesthetic, I love some Vampira. And there's a lot of her in Jaymes Mansfield. So it's great to like bring some attention to some of my great icons of my own loving, you know? I also have some YouTube super thanks from Angie. Thanks, Angie. Jason, Hermage, and Richard. Thank you all so much for the YouTube super thanks. Now I have to get going and shuffle off this mortal coil, okay? Until next time, unpleasant dreams and look at my boobs. Bye. Now hit the outro. Click here and watch my behind the scenes for The Pit Stop, or see me recreate Trixie's pink wig from The Pit Stop. Come on, click it, you know you want to. If you don't click it, I'll make sure you have unpleasant dreams. So click it. Estoy perdida.